Welcome to our symposium celebrating 3 decades of research on white-faced capuchin monkeys at Lomas Barbudal Biological Reserve in Costa Rica. I'd like to start today's symposium by reminding our audience about the value of long-term field sites for answering many of the most interesting questions in evolutionary biology. In many cases, short-term cross-sectional research simply can't provide the necessary data, or at least produces lower quality answers to those questions. Long-term studies are extremely difficult and costly to run, but we hope to persuade our audience that the benefits exceed the costs. So these are some of the questions that we can answer with long-term sites. How do species typical life histories evolve, and what factors determine within species variation in life history characteristics? By documenting the lives of individuals from birth until death, we not only succeed in recording lifetime reproductive success, but we can also better capture the tremendous inter-individual variation in behavioral strategies and the circumstances that cause this variation. How do environmental disturbances and rare events impact social and feeding strategies? For example, at Lomas, we are currently working on papers documenting the impact of major fires and an El Niño drought on the behavioral endocrinology and behavioral strategies used by the monkeys, and the fitness impact of these environmental catastrophes. Information that could have important conservation implications. How do personality traits develop and evolve? What is their adaptive value? We assume that personality traits are constants, but by taking repeat measurements over the lifespan, we can answer questions about what aspects of personality are relatively fixed and which are more malleable, as well as examining the factors that cause shifts in behavioral tendencies. What is the impact of kinship on social strategies and population dynamics? Some of the biggest surprises in our research program have come from genetic analyses using fecal samples, which enable us to non-invasively assign paternity. We know from this that alpha males monopolize paternity almost completely, except for avoiding inbreeding with their female descendants. We also know that when males co-disperse, they tend to do so with relatives, related at around R equals 0.25. We also know that fissions occur along matrilines, and the neighboring groups often contain many individuals who are genetically related, and with whom at least some group members have long relationship histories, despite the xenophobia nature of current between-group interaction. This type of knowledge casts new light on many prior assumptions. How do behavioral traits develop? We have been able to document the acquisition of extractive foraging skills and the changes in behavioral repertoires as individuals age and are exposed to different social influences. This allows us to make inferences about the learning strategies they employ at different phases of their lives. Even within the same social group, there is considerable variation with regard to social exposure to particular demonstrators. Do capuchins have social traditions? What selective pressures affect the dynamics of cultural evolution at the level of the behavioral trait, the individual, the dyad, and the social group? We have documented the origins of new behavioral traits and followed their spread and extinction in multiple social groups. How do changing environments affect phenotypic plasticity and population dynamics? Combining our detailed behavioral data with our demographic data and basic ecological measures, we are well positioned to answer many questions about the factors contributing to phenotypic plasticity. Irene's talk will also demonstrate the capacity of data sets like ours to estimate heritability of traits using our pedigree data. I can't resist bragging just a little bit about what we have accomplished in the data collection front over the past 3 decades. We have succeeded in maintaining a fairly constant core data collection protocol across all 3 decades, but particularly in the last 2 decades for both demographic and behavioral data collection, which includes strict inter-observer reliability protocols. We now have well over 111,000 hours of behavioral records on 13 social groups, including over 750 individuals. This is supplemented by fecal sample collection for hormonal measurements and pedigree determination, and special additional protocols for fights and extractive foraging. The behavioral data collection includes not just species-typical behaviors, but also careful descriptions of all novel or group-specific behaviors. When possible, we do audio and video recordings in order to enhance our descriptions of behavioral repertoires. And we have each observer complete personality assessments for the monkeys they know at the end of their time with us, which is typically a year. Field experiments designed to test specific questions about cognitive processes are layered on top of this core protocol. I also want to add a brief note about COVID. border closures forced us to shut down the site from mid-March through mid-November 2020. But we're fortunate in that all scientific evidence thus far indicates that Capuchins seem not to be susceptible to COVID, and that Costa Rica has a superb Ministry of Public Health, which means that it's also easier to keep researchers safe than it is in most countries. So after careful consultation with all branches of the government, as well as UCLA Health and Safety, we were able to get back to Costa Rica and resume data collection with new safety precautions in place. And fortunately, this happened before irreparable damage was done to the integrity of the demographic data, although we do have quite wide margins of error for birth dates in 2020, obviously. We've also decided to stop monitoring a few of the groups we've been following for the past several years. The Capuchin population is thriving, actually doing a bit better than normal in terms of mortality and birth rates. The main way in which COVID has damaged the project is in the environmental education efforts, since we no longer can meet in person with students and community members. So we've had a 15-month gap in our environmental education. Well, we did a lot of online stuff during that time, but we couldn't meet face-to-face. A project like this has many, many people to thank, and I can't thank them all here, though you'll hear more about the contributions of these people in the talks that follow. But I want to especially thank the field crew and the funding agencies during the past 3 decades. Thank you for attending today.